Hi, my name is Matt Kosterman. I'm a 56-year-old white guy living in Chicago, Illinois. For the first 50 plus years of my life, I didn't think I was allowed to be here. Not just here in Chicago, but here, on Earth, in a body. I suffered from depression for most of my life. I smoked my first joint at age 11 and had my first drink of Southern Comfort straight from the bottle at age 13. While the cannabis never really took hold as an addiction, I drank alcohol for the next 20 years, many times to excess. In 1998, I began psychotherapy, and in the year 2000, I started on antidepressants. I spent 12 years on them and 15 years in traditional talk therapy. Meanwhile, I built a successful business, became a father to 2 amazing girls, and rehabbed an old house in a nice suburb. I did all the things. In 2010, I went through divorce, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. Fun times. After much flailing about, I got my head on straight in 2015, only to begin experiencing severe chronic pelvic pain along with fibromyalgia. I spent nearly 3 years in the Western medical system trying desperately to heal. In 2018, out of money and out of patience, my healing journey really kicked into gear after my first magic mushroom trip. The years since have been an amazing and challenging ride. I've traversed the physical and not so physical worlds and been fortunate to work with many, many talented healers. As a result of all my efforts, I now find myself in a place of receiving, contentment, and prosperity, the likes of which had eluded me for most of my life. There's a man named Daryl Anka who channels a being called Bashar. Bashar describes the process of engaging with a healer, that of giving yourself what is essentially a permission slip to move towards wholeness, healing, and right relationship. This podcast is an effort to share some of what I've learned and introduce you to some of the people and ways that literally gave me what feels like my permission slip for existence. It's also an effort to continue to spread the word that the traditional Western medical system, while effective for a great many things, is not necessarily the be-all end-all solution to every health problem, especially when the problem may be more spiritual than it is physical, as it was in my case. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy it. Please like, subscribe, and do all the social media things that help spread the word. Share these links with people directly in your community. It is my sincere hope that you and others will benefit from my experiences. I'm here today with a dear friend, Melissa Ford, whom I've known for, I just was looked at my calendar, Melissa, I have known for over 12 years, which is pretty hard to believe. And Melissa is a business and life coach, and she has been instrumental in my journey. I worked with her over the years. I did a big engagement with her in, 2016. And we have stayed in touch regularly. She lives here in Chicago. And welcome, Melissa. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, Matt, I'm excited to be here and talk about all things infinity.
That's right. That's right. We're gonna bring the infinite right into people's living rooms.
Good.
Yeah,
It's
or
where it belongs.
cars, or bedrooms, or wherever they happen to be listening to this. Uh, so so like I said, Melissa is a life coach. I was introduced to her when I was very stuck by a friend who said, "Why don't you give Melissa a call?" And I sort of tentatively did a session here and a session there, and then we would get into some stuff that was maybe I don't want to quite go there, and so then I I back off for a little bit, and then she proposed to me that we really get into it, and I was very confronted by that, and I believe it was then attending the Landmark Forum that opened my eyes to what I really needed, and so I jumped in, and I'm very grateful that I did, and I'd just like to just chat with Melissa today, and have her, like we said, talk about all things infinite, the non-dual consciousness, how she works, how she helps people, and the permission slip that she offers.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know, just give us a little background, Melissa. Tell us about yourself, the little bio, and where you're
Okay.
from. And,
So I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago. So I've been in this great state my entire life, slowly making my way eastward from Downers Grove to Oak Park to Chicago. And you had sent me some questions about, you know, what's my story? What
Yeah.
was it like growing up? What was the trauma I experienced? Have I overcome it? And I have to say, I had a really good childhood. Um, that was my experience of it. There were things, of course, going on because we're raised by other humans who are confused about what they are, and they have their own trauma and their own generational legacies that they hand on to, like what we all do.
Yeah, they
But
they
overall,
never got they didn't get the manual, right? There was no manual
no,
for
no
how this all worked.
manual. My mom used to say to me, when I had kids, she said to me, Melissa, I did my crummy best. And I really liked that because she did, and I have myself. But so I had a good childhood growing up, and I got into coaching when I was in my 30s because I was really challenged to parent my first child. So I have a son and a daughter. And I realized that if I didn't figure something out, I mean, thank goodness I had that awareness in my 30s, that if I didn't figure something out, by the time my son, who I deeply love, by the time he'd be a teen, we probably wouldn't have any relationship.
Mhm.
So I was highly motivated to get on this path and figure out what the hell was going on. So I got on this path, and the first place I went to was the Option Institute, and I studied there for 14 years. And the whole thing in the Option Institute was that your thoughts create how you feel and how you behave. They create your reality. And it was life changing for me because I saw people as causing my problems, making my life hard,
Mm.
not giving me what I wanted, not listening to me. So I was a very self righteous and still can be at times victim.
Sure.
So that's where my journey began. And I was just in love with exploring the mind and how the world gets created, how reality gets created. So over the years, I've I tend to hang out with people for a period of time. And when I say people, with mentors and coaches and processes and philosophies. So after the Option Institute, I went on, and I have just finished 15 years working with an outstanding coach whose name is Steve Chandler. He's
Mm.
retiring, and he's the one who really helped me build my coaching business and learn how to be a professional and how to create clients through service, make money. So grateful to this guy because life has changed, not just because of my profession and my ability to develop there, but with my ability to help people. So the people that I work with are primarily in business, and they are solopreneurs like yourself. They can have their own businesses, or they can be coaches, consultants, whatever it looks like. And I help people like that really grow a business, run a business like a business, realize that the more impersonal business becomes, the more fun, the more it's a game, the more that they can really help people, whether it's uh, being creative and taking photos or being creative and working with somebody. So
So that's the more impersonal it becomes? I just want
yes.
to clarify. Yeah, yeah, 'cause
Yep,
I
the more impersonal, the more that there's a realization that the story of me and my identity and what I need and what's deficient in me and what things mean, and if somebody says no, that's rejection, and if somebody says yes, oh, how am I ever gonna deliver on what I told them that I would do? All that stuff has nothing to do with the work that you wanna do with somebody. Again, regardless if you're catering, if you're somebody who's consulting in business, whatever it is, the more impersonal it is, the more you're in reality and really helping people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I work with entrepreneurs like that, and I also work with leaders inside organizations. I consider entrepreneurs also leaders, but leaders inside organizations. And with folks like leaders, I help them with communication. I help them with leading teams through co created agreements rather than expectations. Shout
Mhm.
out to Chandler on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and really getting clear about the role they play. And here again, impersonal shows up. So the role they play is much more uh, inspiring and useful for a leader to get clear on, rather than it's my job and it's my reputation and it's my career and what's my legacy, all the things again that have them hyper focused on an idea of them that's absolutely insecure
Yeah.
and deficient and lacking.
Yeah.
So anytime I work with somebody, it's the practical, and I'll call it the spiritual, the practical kind of nuts and bolts of client creation or leadership. And then the spiritual, which is what are you? What
Hmm.
gets in the way, which is only the story ever of an idea of me. And then we work on both levels. And it can be very confronting because
Hmm.
it's really the first time where people start to see that not getting what they want is really coming from the narrative they have about themselves. And that's
Of not deserving it, or
not deserving.
not being
Yep.
allowed, not being
Yep.
good enough.
Yeah. Not good enough, not worthy, not mattering, insignificant,
Right.
unlovable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we tend to try to get those things fulfilled through the business, through the relationship, through all the other ways, as opposed to just through ourselves.
Yeah. And trying to get them fulfilled through all those ways you're talking about, and I've done all of them, it's absolutely unachievable. It's an impossible task. And that's how the cycle keeps going. Meaning, oh, if I just make enough money, then I'll be able to say what I want. I'll have a voice. People will listen to me. I'll finally matter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much money you make, you'll still, if you still think of yourself as this limited, separate self, the roller coaster keeps going.
Yeah. The whole remains unfilled.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And it's especially with the money. I mean, I think it's a big part of everybody's journey, but it's been a big part of mine, and I still work on it. It's still in fact, just this morning I was looking at some Gene Keys stuff around around uh, money and spirituality, and it's and tying into, I love what you said about service, and that was a big learning. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about being in service and what that means.
Yeah. Well, when I first started coaching, I I wanted a business. The coach I hired, who I've referred to, his whole thing was about being of service. And that his idea was what you want to do, Melissa, is you want to give people an experience of coaching. You don't want to give them a conceptual idea of what it is. You don't want to tell them about what's great about you and all your stories about the people's lives you've saved and what's incredible about you and how you're different, blah blah, the brand. You don't want to do that. You want to give them an experience. You want them to see what it's like to coach with you. That's what you want to do. And that's of service. That's what you want to do. And anything that has to do with you, needing them to like you, needing them to think that you're impressive, needing them to hire you, needing their money, needing anything from them, diminishes the level of service that you bring.
Mm.
And I heard this, and it was very hard for me to compute because all I wanted to do was to get clients and make money, because what I needed over here was to have that voice, like I said earlier. So it was all about, I need that money.
Yeah.
And finally, over the years, my understanding of service really was losing sight of this idea of me and wholly focusing on the other person and hearing what they wanted.
Mm.
Hearing what they wanted, hearing their story, not falling for it, listening to what was getting in their way, having, a real love and compassion, which just naturally shines through when any thought about me or what I think about them just falls to the side. And that was
Mhm.
something that took practice. That was something that really brought so much more joy and fun into client creation and helping people. So service was, how can I help you first? I don't need something from you. I'm fully aware I run a coaching business. So the highest form of being served by me is we work together. You pay me, I help you, we
Right.
coach.
Right.
But it just made it really turned it more into a real joy to be with people because the need this it became more impersonal, Matt, just like I
Yeah,
was talking
yeah,
about earlier.
sure. And I think there's, I don't know if you can speak to, and I still struggle with this today, and I know that when I try to explain this concept to people of service, excuse me, the struggle between there seems to be a conception that being of service means I'm volunteering,
Yes.
right? Means I'm doing something for nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's out of the kindness of my heart. And
Yeah,
if I take any money, first of all, that's not spiritual and that's not service.
right.
But it's the complete opposite because in reality, businesses, which is what you have and what I have to be profitable. Money has to exchange hand for the service, the
Mhm.
product, the service that I'm selling. So when I speak about service, I'm talking about um, just like I said earlier, a clarity that when we're talking, it's about you. I'm still fully aware I have this business. It's not free. It's not, it's not charity.
Right.
And the service equation, in order for my business to exist and for me to keep doing the work that I'm doing, the service equation has to include me. So if it's just giving things away and giving things away, I'm not running a business.
Yeah.
I'm
Now you're running a
doing,
charity.
yeah, it's all
And
pro bono and then I can do that too as well.
yeah.
But I have found that when people pay for things, they value it. They show up differently. Sometimes even in the payment of the for the engagement, you can see transformation occur because people show up differently. They'll go to those places they're afraid to go to in a
Yeah.
coaching session because
Yeah.
you know what? Hell, I paid for this.
Absolutely. And that was exactly, for all you listeners out there, that was exactly how it worked for me, at the time when I was sort of stumbling along and engaging with Melissa here and there, and paying it was, for me, it was a lot of money for just, for, 90-minute sessions, 2-hour sessions. I don't remember exactly what it was. Um, I knew I wanted to change, to transform. I knew I was uncomfortable being who I was being, and I was deeply in debt. I had already filed for bankruptcy. I'd already, foreclosure, divorce, all of the trifecta, and I was digging my way out of this, and and I believe it was, and so she had proposed a big chunk of money to help me get out of the tax debt, and that was what was confronting to me. And I was like, why don't I just get out of the tax? I could use some of that money to just, it wasn't as much as the tax debt, but it was a lot of money. And
And
then,
you
and so,
borrowed that money too.
well, but first, if you recall, you first asked, there was a lower amount, and I was like, I'm not ready to do this. And then I did the landmark forum, and I had that transformational experience. And then I came back a couple months later and said, okay, let's go. And then the number went up a lot. And 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 uh, and I again, I wanted the change, and I saw that she had something. There was part of me that knew that there was something that you had that would help me with this, and so I did. I borrowed a whole bunch of money,
Yes, you did.
uh, and if nothing else, it sharpens the mind. It sharpens the focus. Uh, and I called it getting a PhD in me, because I had never done any postgraduate work, never really appealed to me. And so that was my investment in myself, and it has paid off tremendous dividends. It took a little while, but as of earlier this year, I finally paid off that big anchor, yeah, of tax debt.
Matt, do you remember when you came in and you said, "Hey, Melissa, okay, I think I'm going to do this, but can I ask you a question?" And we got together, and I said, "What's the question?" You said, "Is there any guarantee
Right,
that
right,
that I'm going to be able to create what I want?" I
Yeah.
looked at you and I went, yeah, no, there
No.
is no guarantee. And then I sat there and this brilliance came through and I said, here's what I will guarantee. If after a month, because you and I were working for what, 13 months, if after a month
Mhm.
you're not doing what you need to do, then I'll fire your ass and I'll give you all your money back. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Because
yeah,
that's one thing too that I'm so aware of. That things can't change unless you were willing to do the work. You
right.
were willing to get temporarily uncomfortable. One of the questions you sent me is, if somebody wants to change a situation,
Mhm.
uh, what advice do you have for them? The first piece of advice is, are they willing, are you willing to do the work? Do
Yeah,
you realize I don't have a magic wand?
right,
But if you're willing to do it, I will hang in there with you until the ends of the earth. I will bring everything I've got. So that's one thing. Another thing is, when you hire somebody like a coach or photographer, make sure they're good. Make sure they do their own work. Make sure that they stay on the learning curve
right.
and realize they don't always have all the answers. So you hung in there. You really did. And um, I respect that of you. I also am in awe of your brilliant mind, your ability to learn, the fact that you walk your talk, man, you just keep going.
Thank
And
you.
it's exciting. And anytime we get together and have conversations, I walk out learning so much. There's so many things I don't, and I
Well,
so
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah. There's a
It's
it's a
awesome.
it's a giant void that wants to be filled all the time. I remember the other pivotal part related to that was when, because I was in a lot of physical pain, when I was working with you, and I don't know, guess I was expecting you to fix that for me. And, and I would come in week after week and bitch and moan and complain that the pain wasn't gone, and I tried this, and I had tried that, and I dabbled in this, and finally, we were a good way into it, a couple months into it, and you said, "Hey, look, you can, I've got your money. I mean, I'll give it back to you, but you can come in and you can complain about this every week, eh, or you can get into action."
Yeah,
And that was really, the fulcrum right there. That was what really I was like, "Huh, yeah, I guess I could, couldn't I?" And that was what really launched a lot of things for me, from there. Um, so thank you for that. And that's, we're in a body, we're in this life, bodies move, they need to do things, and you gotta be in action. And, I mean, I've spent a lot of money on this journey, and I don't regret any of it. And there's none, none of it. I learn something big or small from every interaction.
same. Me too.
Yeah,
And to me, it's just a wild, cool internal adventure. And then the things that change internally, all of a sudden the world looks different.
yeah,
And that's what's so exciting, because for years I tried to get circumstances to change by changing me, pretending to be something different, by controlling people, by through massive resentment and anger and shutting down myself or somebody else. And I'll tell you, it doesn't work.
no,
And it wasn't until later, really, in my life where I started to wake up to what techniques, tactics, approaches that I was using were just reinforcing this traumatic story of a deficient me. I had no idea that that was going on. And through the last 5 years, really moving more into this non dual world and seeing that seeing that the mind, wow, creates our entire reality. And when we start to when we start to see things that shift the subconscious belief system that totally drives this system called Melissa Ford,
right.
until that's seen and it's questioned from a place of curiosity, not trying to change it, that's when things start to open up and life gets cool and exciting, and you know relationships deepen, and the ability to help a client improves. It's tremendous.
Yeah, yeah. So, digging. dig into that for a minute. So this idea, not everybody knows. I don't think everybody knows about this concept of non-duality. It's sort of a negation, right? So what is how would you define non-duality?
Gosh, I went on Google because I didn't have a definition, and
Mm.
it said ChatGPT.
ChatGPT, right, right.
It said, not separate, unified whole. That's what it said, and my experience of it really is seeing that this separate self, this concept of me, this storyline that's been going on for years about me
Mhm.
simply isn't true. It's not what I am. And so I get glimpses from time to time outside of this egoic mind. I get glimpses of this peace and this ease, this awareness, this beingness, and then I can watch the character Melissa doing crazy things or saying crazy things or
Yeah.
being loving, or it's really waking up to that reality is 100% viewed through, created by the mind and viewed through, especially the egoic mind, of a lens of deficiency. So
Mm,
what we
mhm,
had said earlier, when
mhm.
you're like, oh, unworthy, unlovable, don't matter, uh, incompetent. We all have that lens, like a pair of glasses that are sitting on our faces, are consumed by our minds that we think is us, and we're not even aware it's there.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea that this not mattering thing was even a subconscious belief driving the Melissa system. No idea until I was in a coaching call about 4 years ago, and I'm chit-chatting with my coach, and I must have been sharing some story about my husband. And she went, "Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You think you don't matter." Now, I had been studying limiting beliefs, like I said, for years. I had
Yeah.
never come across that. And the
Mm,
minute she said it, I was intrigued, horrified, and ashamed all in one
mm,
breath. It was
mm,
just like,
mhm.
I knew it was true, but I couldn't what? What do you
Yeah.
mean I don't matter? "Oh, yeah, you think you don't matter." Sure enough, I began that exploration, Matt. I don't matter was everywhere. I don't matter in my family. I don't matter that, I moved into this condo. None of these people in this building think that I'm significant or even matter. They don't talk to me. So everything seen out there was through this lens.
Wow.
Yeah, and it blew my mind, and at first it was like, "Holy shit."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a tsunami of not mattering, but I was reassured, "Oh, listen, when you first start to see it, watch out, it'll be everywhere, cause
Everywhere.
it is. It's the ego operating."
How did it land in your body when the realization, or was it mental? Do you remember,
Different times, so like a mind-blowing awareness the first time it was said. It landed in my body another time.
okay.
When you've been living this avatar and you really think it's you and you think really the world is what it is, and then you start to see that's not the case,
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's either super exciting, but mostly it can be very confronting because the identity's job is to survive.
Right.
So if the mind truly believes that I don't matter, the mind will fight tooth and nail to continue not to matter because that's what I am. That's me.
That's me, right? Not mattering. You're not mattering, Melissa.
That's good. I should change my little name on
Change your
these
way
Zoom
of yeah.
screens, Melissa not mattering.
Yeah, and then all of your everything that you create in your reality will support that.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
the time.
it just automatically gets created because it's seen through that lens.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about this earlier, but that's something that's really helped me is to go beyond and realize, actually, our language requires, like, "Oh, I create that. I'm the creator." Yeah, I'm I'm perception in this localized form, of consciousness and aliveness and awareness and the
Yeah.
universe. But really, what's going on is I didn't do it. I'm not, there isn't a me that's going, you know what? I think I'll screw myself over and think that I don't matter and people
Right.
use me and I'm going to be resentful. But it's operating all the time. And I think that's what was so shocking was to see how much it created everything.
Mm-hmm.
It created
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Can I share a story with you about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So again, when you first start to discover that you don't exist, it's merely an accumulation of ideas and beliefs of lack. You
Mm-hmm.
don't exist. It's hard to get your mind around it. And then, of course, you might hear it, but then the next minute you're back in this identified mind.
Yeah.
So I was having another coaching call where I was sharing with my coach, oh, yeah, my husband truly thinks that I don't matter. By the way, folks, I'm still married. And yeah, just want to let everybody know
And your
that
kids still talk to
to
you
a
and they love
different,
you.
yeah, to a different guy. No,
Yeah.
just to the same guy. But so she said, well, create a list. Like, tell me the evidence of why you believe this. So boy, that was quick. I just whipped it all out, put it down on paper, and I read it off. I'm like, let me tell you why.
Yeah.
He doesn't listen to me. He interrupts me. He's not interested in what I'm saying. I don't get any eye contact. Sometimes he even walks out of the room,
Mm-hmm. When
you
you're
know?
talking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When I'm talking about something that really matters. And so she's like, okay. And I'm thinking, well, that's weird. Any other coach would have jumped onto that and should have talked me through how to get divorced and da da da. And she said, well, let's just do this. If you're open to doing this, the next time you feel, because you and I share this in common, I
Mm-hmm.
can really feel something at a visceral level. The next time you feel what you might label as resentment or rage or whatever it is, just as best you can, kind of drop into awareness and watch what the Melissa system is doing. Now, that may sound odd to people who are listening, but to try to create some distance between what I'm doing and what I'm creating, but what the Melissa system is doing, just watch. I'm like, okay. So one day I'm in the kitchen and I'm emptying the dishwasher and I can see into the living room and my husband's there and we're talking. And I feel this feeling. I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I'm so mad. And I went, oh, this might be the time to do that little bit of homework. And so I'm noticing this sensation of like buildup in my gut and my throat's getting tighter and I'm just so like tense. And I'm watching myself empty the dishwasher. I'm not giving him any eye contact.
Mm.
I'm absolutely not interested in anything he's saying.
Mm.
I noticed words coming out of my mouth where I'm interrupting him and trying to redirect him. And then I watched myself walk out of the room.
Mm. Interesting.
How fascinating.
Mm.
So this is the coolest thing, is to start to see that what's projected outwards is actually an exact mirror of my behavior.
Yeah. 100%.
And that was another wake up. So it wasn't just intellectual. It was, wow, look at what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then more followed from that, but that was another huge shift, and that was a moment where I realized, "Oh my gosh, whatever I judge, whatever I resist, whatever I deem intolerable, I've got my equivalent."
Mm-hmm.
And
It has,
everybody does.
it has to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 'cause they're made out of what this is made out of.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that it doesn't sound like you've fallen into the it's a bit of a trap that I used to get into more often of then I would look for again the story, what's the reason behind that and what happened in my childhood that made me this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that is a trap because it's more of the mind, it's the identified mind now trying to work its way out of conditioning that we don't really know why. I mean, you could point to your self-absorbed dad or your insecure, addicted mom. I could do the same.
yeah,
There
I
isn't any answer in that because it's happening right now. It's a system that's been conditioned, and that past, that's over, and that doesn't mean we're, um, diminishing it in any
no,
way,
right, or
but
that we were unaffected by it, but it is over.
right, right, and so now, you said this earlier, what's here for me to heal, to parent, to love, that can't be found in an answer of who's responsible. Um, there's just nothing there.
Yeah,
It's more of the same story. It almost deepens the story and makes it more real and true.
for sure. If I look at it, and this may be the case for others who are listening, for me, I was so utterly unaware early, through so much of my life that I did have a lot of experienced trauma growing up. Everybody does. It's part of the journey.
Yes.
But I was just so utterly unaware of it that once that becoming aware of it was such a revelation that then I hung on that,
Yeah.
right? And that I continue to go back to that well for an answer, and the answer is not there.
No. I did something similar, but I was so good at anger and resentment for so long
Mhm.
that it was getting kind of old for me. But when I would go back and I'd go back, I'd be it was really funny. I'd be told, Melissa, you're going to get bored of that.
Mhm.
'Cause you're not gonna find anything there.
Mhm.
And again, there was kind of a pivotal moment where I knew it was true because I'd been digging around in there for years, and it
Yeah.
had just strengthened the victim story,
Sure.
you know? But I'm glad you brought it up because you do go looking in all kinds of places where there aren't any answers. I think that's part of the journey.
Yeah. So, like you said, to get bored with it. I mean, I've had a similar experience with sugar addiction, which I've fought for a long time, and I had an advisor say, it's just gonna fall away, and you can, So I think you get bored of it, and it's kind of where I'm at. There's still a hook there, um, but it's like, okay, I can be that person or not. And I think it seems if I look at sort of, looking back at our work together, one of the things I always appreciated is your, I bring something up and you say, okay, let's slow it down, right?
Mm.
Because my mind, especially, I don't know about everybody else's, but man, it's creating stories and meaning very rapidly.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could speak to that a little bit about the slowing it down. I remember one you took me through an exercise, some kind of a meditation where, you slowed my mind like to a stop. It was crazy. I don't even remember what that was, but there was no thought there for a few minutes, which I had never experienced in my life.
Yeah. Well, that was a great coaching session, I guess.
Great. Been trying to get back to that place ever since.
Slowing down. I think slowing down is oh gosh, one of my favorite questions for slowing a client down is they'll start off and a story will start coming out. I want to tell you about my boss and I want to tell you how he's always micromanaging me and,
Yeah.
how I don't have any agency and my ideas aren't considered. Um, and then to simply ask, is that true?
Hmm.
And a lot of people will say, well, not the whole thing, especially if you've got a loving, trusted relationship with the person.
As a as a
They
co-
know.
your coach as a coach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, thanks, not with the
Right.
boss, but as a
Right. Right.
coach, yeah. So that they know that they're not gonna get judged. and
Mhm.
they're safe. Like, it's safe enough to go, well, that story isn't totally true. They did take this idea, and I got employee of the month and got a raise, and it'll start coming out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So slowing down, I remember one time saying, I'm going to tell you a story. This was to my coach. I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to know nothing in it is true, but just listen.
Mm. Yeah, there you go.
So, so slowing down is looking at what's true, what isn't. Um,
What else is
asking,
true, right? What else could be true?
yeah, what else could be true? Absolutely. How do you benefit from standing by that story and saying it's true?
Mhm.
Like, what are the benefits?
What's the payoff?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, there isn't any payoff. I'm losing hair and sleep and everything else. And it's like, well, there is a payoff because it keeps getting repeated.
Right.
Like it's
And then it goes then going back to the earlier thing of the lack of not being, it's somehow the juice usually is reinforcing that core belief.
100%. Yeah. And now I'm right.
Mhm.
And now I'm self righteous. And now you see life would be different, but for these people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These mere mortal that are getting in my way of
Yeah,
being happy.
there's a comfort in the suffering. There's a comfort and safety, in snuggling up with the wet blanket and sucking your thumb. I mean, there just is. So that's a great way to slow down. It's just to get some space between what's being spewed out as truth and reality and considering something else through a more impersonal lens,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know?
back to the original thing that you talked about is
Yeah,
making business less personal.
yeah. Or anything, your siblings' relationship, your relationship with your dead parents, your
Yeah,
or
yeah.
alive parents if you're still fortunate enough, and so that's to me what slowing down. I used to think when I heard that concept was, oh, inaction, like slow
Mhm,
down, just slow
mhm.
it down, take a break. And sometimes it can be that, but for the most part it's about slowing down the spinning of the mind, the endless thinking, the loops of thinking, the unquestioned reality. And
Sure.
that's my job, is to help someone do that.
Yeah, and I imagine that you meet some resistance, especially in some of the higher powered executive suites and whatnot with go, 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 do, 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 right? What are
Yeah.
your yeah, how do you work? What are your
What do I do with that, right?
tips and yeah. No, I gotta, this has to be done and
Yeah.
we have a deadline.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you that it's surprising sometimes that you'll get people who are so aware. Like I would have a lot of judgments about people inside organizations like, oh, they don't get it. They're just on this fast track. But there's a lot of people who are aware and they realize that it has a lot to do with their value and their image and their what they think people are going to be thinking about them. So sometimes I'll offer up a question such as, okay, say you could only do, let's play this game. Do 5% less. What does that look like? Just
Mhm.
to kind of give them a little like something to play with, something to imagine. Like if you could cut out 5% of what you do or what's on your plate, what would be the first thing to go?
Mm.
And a lot of times I'll have to say to people, and you don't have to do it.
But just hypothetically, what would go?
Yeah, yeah, and in fact, if you come up with something and you think it's a really great idea, promise me you're not gonna take any action on it. Because
Mhm,
what will happen is the mind keeps trying to defend, "This is what I have to do, and this is how much it is," and the whole thing.
mhm.
Sometimes what I'll do is I'll offer something up and somebody's really dug into a story, then I'll just let them go, and I'll approach it from another angle. I
Hmm.
might simply say to them, um, "Does your life feel relaxed? Do you feel relaxed at work? What do you think is contributing to this sped up kind of chaotic feeling you're having?" If they tell me no, they're not relaxed.
Sure.
Would it be okay if you were 2% more relaxed? So
Hmm.
I just try to approach it as best I can. If I feel like there's this major pushback though, sometimes they're just not ready to approach it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes they just aren't. So that's the beauty too of having coaching going on in your life is that you do develop more of an openness, you do develop more of um, a willingness to consider something else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you've made the commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. It really does come down to that.
Yeah.
If you're just showing up to coaching, checking a box, nothing's gonna change.
Right. 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 Um, yeah. And on the subject of change, another piece that you brought to me was, I think it was from the book The Way of Aikido, uh,
Mhm.
and it was the graph. We have this idea in our society that change is linear, that growth is linear, that it's going to be, from the lower left to the upper right in a straight line at some particular angle. And there's a great chart in there. I'll do my best to find it and put a link in. That it's a bumpy path. It might have a little, you might have a little increase, and then it levels out, and it might even drop off a little bit, and then, but it's always, if you lay a mathematically, whatever, the regression line over it, it is a line upwards to the right. It just doesn't always feel like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the book that I don't recall the book you said, but the one that I love is Mastery by George
Okay.
Leonard, and
Okay.
he talks about it's exactly what you said, and he talks about how there's, like, an initial bump up, an upward movement in learning, and then there's a place where there's this plateau.
Right.
But if you zoom in really and you look at the plateau, there's ups and downs, but that can be the place where your mind's like, I'm stuck, I'm not going anywhere, nothing's changed, it's still the same. I recently had somebody complete a good chunk of time with me, and out of their mouth came, I'm still in the same place, I'm still in the same place. I'm like,
Mm,
no,
mm,
you're
mhm,
not, because I could
mhm.
see all these things that had shifted, but their mind was cycling there. So this plateau, what George Leonard would talk about is learn to love the plateau. Like,
Okay.
hang out in the plateau, because there are the ups, there are the downs, and what's happening is there's all this integration, there's this learning, there's this shifting going on, there's this invisible progress, and then all of a sudden there'll just be this, you know, upward
Yeah.
movement where boom, something changes, and then I know you experience it, I experience, and it's just like, "Whoa." It's not things open up.
Right.
And there's a deepening, of an understanding of whatever it is that you were working on, whether
Yeah.
it's communication or sales or a relationship or whatever it is.
Sure.
Yeah,
And yeah, and in that integration, the mind, the mind is learning to let go of the story a little bit, uh, and see things a new way. And then, one of the things I've actually, because I'll make anything into a pitfall, right? But the upward, I find myself getting almost, you can call it addiction for lack of a better word. You get addicted to that upward
yeah,
trajectory, and then when it does flatten out, it's like, where the drug wore off. Where did it go?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great example of the identified mind operating, ego, which is the hit, like, oh, look at this. I'm smart. Oh, I finally found something. I see something different and new. And
Right.
then all of a sudden it plateaus out and back in comes the identity. You're never going to figure this thing out. You can make anything into a pitfall. What the heck's wrong with you? Blah, blah,
Yep.
blah,
Yep.
blah.
Yep.
You're incompetent. That's what
Yep.
my mind would be saying.
Yeah. You're not enough. You're not worthy.
Yeah.
Right, you'll
So
never get there.
Yeah. So that's going to keep happening when the identity pops in, but from that place of awareness, when, by the beautiful grace of life, you see something different.
Hmm.
There's nothing that claims that learning or that plateau or anything. You just see it clearly for what it is. It's
What's
life,
that?
it's
Yeah, it's that,
expression.
and it's developing that witness role that I think, you alluded to earlier, that you're watching. I'm
Yeah.
watching this, getting to watch the system that is Matt, having these cravings, having this,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to identifying as the craving.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's a great way to say it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it goes to, like Ram Dass's teachings, that we are ultimately, we are awareness, we are attention. That's what we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And quite an undertaking when for most of our lives we've not identified with that.
right.
We just haven't, and I think that's part of what life is. It's this experiencing conditioning and these shocks to the system, trauma, and for some of us it's an extreme version of it.
Hmm.
I wasn't mentally or physically abused or grew up in poverty or violence, but there's all of us have these traumas, and so all this is going on, and life is the coming to this awareness of what we are and watching this unlearning and this learning and waking up and falling asleep, and it's kind
Yeah,
of the whole thing.
that's the
And
whole thing.
sometimes it's sheer beauty and other times it's
Hell.
yeah, it's hell. It's sometimes it feels so shame-filled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a big spiral, the shame. I think it's, yeah. I love that you brought up, with your upbringing. You had, for the most part, abundance. You had a loving family.
Yes.
You didn't have physical, or emotional or mental abuse, and yet you still found yourself at uh, in difficulty with communicating with your son, and developing a loving relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and operating all the time was, the story of lack and totally unaware of it. I just thought that was that was me and it was my thing to overcome and it was be your best self,
Right.
and
Right.
all that other stuff and I'll finally change this and I'll see that and then I'll be good. And it was just a up
Yeah.
and down and up and down until I started to see beyond the idea of me. I mean,
Hmm.
and I don't, I think about that. I think about why did it take the period of time that it took? It's like, oh my gosh, right? I
Right.
could have. The upside is I'm not on my deathbed,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
uh, Why did it take that long? And then finally, I was like, well, again, that's fairly right now. That's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right now, what's happening? That's the mind trying to find these answers. Right
Right.
now, you're seeing it, and you can continue to explore this and get curious about it, and
And there's always more.
there's always more.
Yeah, and I when the quote that always pops into my head when you say, like, why didn't I know this before? It's from the Incredibles, of, the Mr. Incredible, when they're on a car trip somewhere, says, "We'll be there when we get there," which is, ultimately, there's a channel, Bashar, who talks about, what's your hurry? You're an infinite being. You have no beginning. You have no end. Where are you going?
Yeah, where are you going?
Where are you going?
Yeah, and we'll get there when we get there. You're there.
You're already there, in every moment. And because of the conditioning that we've had, and the programming, it would seem that we are programmed to not think that.
Yeah, yeah.
That there's somewhere to go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that I come across when I'm coaching people, especially when we're talking about what they are and feelings and, what do they want? A lot of times what they'll want is they'll want something that's absolutely unachievable. I want to be happy all the time. I want this person to respect me. I want to feel valued. It's like,
Mm,
well, okay, so you
mm,
can't have that, but what do you want that you can? Like if you want
yeah.
to create the next client, let's go do that. If you want the new job title, let's go after that. Um, but y- you know, I've lost my train of thought.
That's all right. That's all right. I mean, I think it
Can you reel me back for a
I
second?
mean, we were talking about, some there's some place to get to, and why aren't I there yet, or why did it take me so long to get here? And it really didn't take you any time to get here because 'cause you're here.
Yeah.
You are where you are, and I think it also, uh, goes to this concept of non-duality. We live in a duality,
Mhm.
meaning if there's good, there has to be bad. If there's happiness, there has to be sadness. You call it karma, call it whatever you want.
Yeah,
And so it's learning to experience and allow any emotion to come through the system that is you without
exactly. So thank you. So I can now connect the dots. Thanks for
mm,
that. So
mhm,
they'll wanna know, what do they do with these things that they want, that are unachievable? What do I do with this emotion? What do I do with this? And it's exactly that. It's allowing the sensation to come through without the story,
yeah,
and the noticing is the doing.
yeah,
'Cause we're so wired to, "Well, I gotta take some action. I've gotta do this. I gotta do that. I've gotta think more positively. I have to reframe this. I have to." It's like,
mhm,
"No, you don't have to do any of that." And
right.
so there's this sense of, "Well, I gotta do something. I gotta do something."
Yeah, right,
Yeah, and it's like, so notice then. Notice and question.
absolutely.
Ask yourself questions.
Yeah, the emotions, I mean, one of my big learnings I've gotten is it's emotion, it's energy and motion, and
Mm,
and they're meant to move through the body, and I don't know if, you talk to your experience about trapping them, where do they get trapped? Where does the emotion get trapped? Where does it not want to be expressed? And that
yeah,
and that's usually the pain point, and the point, if it's just express it and get it out. I was talking to somebody yesterday about that, and they said, uh, I'm too much, or there was some emotion. Oh, it was we were talking about psychedelics, which is one of my favorite topics, and there was a fear. Oh, I don't, I don't. There's all this stuff buried, and I don't want to get it out. And I was like, why the fuck not? Why, it's much better. Trust me, it's much better when it's out than when it's in, because that's when it does the damage.
yeah.
This
So
this
so so did they say why they didn't wanna get it out?
No, but they went, oh, yeah, you're right. You can't
Ah,
when it's out, what's it gonna do? It's been expressed. That's what it wanted the whole time. It wanted to be
yeah,
expressed.
yeah.
In your case, it would seem that, that I'm not your version of I'm not enough
Mm.
was trapped and running your life,
Oh, yeah. Again, not even knowing it was running my life.
right?
Um, a great example of that would be the inability to ask for what I wanted, because if I didn't matter, then if I asked you for what I wanted and you told me no, that was confirmation I didn't matter.
And yeah, and
So, as
devastating.
yeah, yeah. So what was cool about that was seeing all the times where I wouldn't ask for what I wanted. Now it's still sometimes if I ask for what I want, I get told no. Might feel a hit,
Yeah,
but I'm aware of what's going on. It's this story that's operating versus it's not a real thing. It doesn't mean anything other than, oh yeah, that's what's happening. So
yeah.
one of the things that I do is keep asking for what I want, especially when it's uncomfortable.
Mhm, mhm.
Because otherwise, it's the same play out, it's the same reinforcement, it's the same re-traumatizing, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
So you're telling that person to let it out is awesome, ask whatever it is.
Whatever it is. Whatever it is. Yeah, and in your case, you're willing to take the emotional hit that rejection may provide, there may be an emotion that is triggered by rejection, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's an emotion triggered by a story about someone saying no.
Yeah, right, again,
So there
slowing
isn't
it
a
down.
rejection, there's just a no, and then whatever response is occurring here is coming through whatever the meaning is of a no.
That's the filter that it goes
Yeah,
through. Yeah,
yep, yep, and that's the trigger. That's it. That's
yeah,
what's intolerable.
yeah, and getting in I think it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's both getting some space from that and allowing the feeling to be the feeling,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not making the feeling wrong, and not
right,
suppressing
right.
the feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that I'm learning is that the feeling, the emotion can be allowed as a sensation without the story.
Mhm. It can just be.
Not all the time. Yeah.
Sure. No, that's a great point. Yeah. That it can just be the emotion. That's okay. You don't have to hook it to the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Which goes back to, kind of what I said earlier, was talking about how I always wanted to, for a long time, link it back to something that happened in childhood. Oh, well, this is because this happened in childhood. No, I've had the experience of doing a lot of shadow work in this last year, and just the immense amount of anger that was repressed in me.
Yeah.
Uh, that I, I mean, I've had like this lion just growling after exercises, and just fucking pissed off, and I don't know what it was pissed off about, but just let it be pissed off, like just get it out. Like I said, like, why do I want that inside me?
Yeah, I know. I know. I find it really funny when I'll hear somebody say, "Oh, I don't get angry." And I'm just
Mm,
like, "Oh, oh,
right.
okay."
All right, my dear. Thank you so much for your time. It's always such a pleasure to get to chat with you. And
Same, Matt. It's been fun, and anytime we get together and we start to have conversation, and you ask me if I know someone, and I don't, I'm always looking forward to those conversations. It's a pleasure.
thank
Love
you
you
so.
lots.
I love you too, my dear. And until next time,
Okay, take
everybody,
care.
take care. Be well.